Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Breaking the Mold Volume 2, presented by the Tackle Talk podcast. This four-part series is dedicated to four tackle companies who are pushing the envelope of bait design and bringing unique, innovative products to market. On today's episode, we are joined by the founder of Great Lakes Finesse, Dan Miguel. Episode 3 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2 starts right now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
Welcome to the Tackle Talk podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another very special episode of the Tackle Talk podcast as we bring you episode 3 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2, which we will get to in just a second. But first, the Tackle Talk podcast is presented by American Legacy Fishing. And we've got some big news from ALF. We've told you the past couple weeks. In addition to stocking your favorite rods, reels, line, baits, apparel, American Legacy Fishing now offers installation services. So if you have a boat anywhere near Indiana, the guys at American Legacy Fishing can now rig your boat out for you. And that means power pole installation. That means installing your graphs and your wiring, stack mounts, transducers, lithium batteries, chargers, sea deck padding, and even boat cleaning and detailing. The guys at ALF even told us that right now they're currently taking trades on select trolling motors and electronics. So if you have some of those sitting around, you can trade those into ALF for cash to be used for other things as well. Add all of that to the giant list of benefits that you already know from ALF, like a price match guarantee, the internet's best selection of gently used fishing gear, the easiest trade-in program for your old rods and reels on the planet, and now fully rigging out your boat and accessories. And when you add all that together, in my humble opinion, you get the best tackle shop in the country that's all family owned and operated right here in the Midwest. Also, more big news. Again, we've told you the past couple weeks that we have a brand new coupon code for you guys to use at ALF from here on out. No more Tackle Talk 10. Now we are going to be using Tackle Talk 5, all one word, Tackle Talk, the number 5. But that code gets you 5% off. The big part, like we've said, not only is it on regularly priced items, which is what our old code was only good for, now you can stack this code on sale items as well. So you can take an extra 5% off the great sales that ALF already runs. And that was the thing we heard about our last coupon code was like, hey, I like to use it, but obviously there's a lot of things that I can't use it on because ALF runs so many sales. Well, now you get the best of both worlds. You get to use a discount code, you get to take advantage of the sales, and you get to use them together, which means even bigger savings. In my opinion, a much better option. It works on regularly priced and sale items. Again, the code is Tackle Talk 5, so be sure to use that code Tackle Talk 5 at checkout from here on out for even more savings on regularly priced and sale items over at AmericanLegacyFishing.com. Also, again, really quickly, I just want to give you guys another reminder that in a few short weeks, we will be at the Columbus Fishing Expo February 7th, 8th, and 9th. So this is a great chance for us to actually get to see you all and meet you all and hang out. I'm really looking forward to it. We'll be there for 3 whole days, that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, all day. We'll have a booth. We'll have some sweet merch that we've been working on for a couple weeks now. So we're going to have the opportunity for you guys at the expo to see that merch first. We've got new shirts. We've got coffee mugs that we've been asked about for a long time, not with just the Tackle Talk logo, but with a special design that I actually made myself that I'm pretty excited to kind of unveil. So we're going to have some new coffee mugs. We're also going to have tumblers. We're going to have decals. We're going to have some other apparel. We're going to have kids' beanies, all kinds of stuff at the booth. Stop by, say hey. But also, like I said last week, I think was the first time we actually mentioned it, we are going to have micro buzzes at the booth, the bait that we helped design a couple years back, but we're going to have a very limited number of a very special version of the micro buzz. We're not ready to announce it yet. They are still in production, but they are going to be a very special edition of it, and they're all going to be individually numbered and signed, and those can only be bought at the booth at the Columbus Fishing Show from us directly. So it'll be a really cool opportunity for those of you that like the microbuds to have a really collector's version of it. So we're excited for that, but we'll be there hanging out. I'll be doing a couple seminars over the weekend. We'll be signing whatever you want, taking pictures, just hanging out at the booth, having a great time. Our buddy Mike Iaconelli will be there. Fred Rabanus will be there. It should be a great time. So mark your calendars, February 7th, 8th, and 9th, the Columbus Fishing Expo in Columbus, Ohio. Be sure to come out and say hey. All right, everybody, we have officially arrived to episode 3 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2, which, as you've heard a couple times now, is a 4-part series that's dedicated to some of the most innovative products and companies in the industry today, who also just happen to make some of our favorite baits from over the past year or so. So on episode 1, we had Flint Pierce at Battle Baits. Last week, we had episode 2 with Josh Pleiades over at Clutch Swim Baits, and we can't thank you all enough for supporting both of those companies over the past few weeks. We talked about it last week, what we darn near wiped out all the miniguns that Flint had made from Battle Baits, even prepping for that episode to come out. I know he is wrapping up at the East Tennessee Fishing Show this weekend, and then he's going to head back to Missouri and get all caught up on those orders as well. I know he's got a big list of folks waiting for those to come back in stock. Same with Clutch Swim Baits. You guys, I'm not joking. American Legacy Fishing stocked up on those Clutch Ecos at my request before we dropped last week's episode, and we put that code out to save 25%, Clutch 25. And we usually drop these episodes at midnight Eastern time and before 7 a.m. Eastern time, so like 4 a.m. Pacific, they were all sold out over at American Legacy Fishing. And then they opened it up for back ordering, and that sold out in like another hour or two. So you guys are awesome. Thank you guys for supporting these companies, for supporting the series. It seriously makes a big difference to these companies. These aren't your, big Berkeleys or Rapalas or Strike Kings of the world. Your orders make a big difference for these folks. People like Battle Baits and Clutch. These are bootstrapped, individually owned companies, and I know they appreciate you all a ton. But that brings us to episode 3 today, and we are welcoming on a gentleman that I've got to know a little bit over the past year or two, but it's a bait company that I've had my eyes on for probably 3 years now, and I've been fishing their baits, 2 in particular, a lot. So today we have none other than Dan Miguel, the founder of Great Lakes Finesse. Now, a few notes before we jump in here. Number 1, Great Lakes Finesse is, as it sounds, a very northern, small-mouthy kind of finesse brand. Their baits are downsized, they're super natural, they've got some really cool characteristics that set them apart that we talk about in today's episode, and funny enough, it's kind of like the polar opposite of last week's show. Last week we're talking 6 and 7-inch glide baits, this week we're talking like 2-inch micro, downsized finesse soft plastics. So that's the beauty of this series, and what we try to do here on the show is we hit all different corners of the bait world. Hard baits, soft baits, wire baits, big baits, small baits, largemouth, smallmouth. I want to hit it all. And today we dive into a very cool brand with some of the fishiest looking baits out there, all founded and designed by Dan, who's truly like a finesse guy to the bone. So the other thing you're going to hear us talk about a little bit today is that even though they are this really cool, unique, small company, they're growing at a crazy rate, and they were acquired by Pradco in late 2023, which adds a whole new wrinkle to their story. And they are the only company in this whole 4-part series that has actually been acquired and gone through that whole thing and been brought under a bigger company's umbrella. So that is a fun wrinkle to explore. We talk about that in the episode, how that changes things for a company like Great Lakes Finesse, or does it change it at all, right? We're going to find out when we talk to Dan. But the bait that we're going to chat about specifically today is the Juvie Crawl, which, if you remember, that won our Swimmy Award this year for the best new lure of 2024, and for good reason. It's a really unique, innovative take on like a crawl tube, and it's a bait that I've had a lot of fun throwing over the past year. And the last thing I'm going to say here, hopefully you guys have picked up on this theme by now, because I'm not going to sit here and leave you hanging without saving you some money. We've got a great deal for you, this time courtesy of LureNet. So American Legacy Fishing is working on getting Great Lakes Finesse in stock this year, but we're not quite there yet. So Dan over at Great Lakes Finesse was kind enough to extend a 15% off all Great Lakes Finesse baits over at lurenet.com with code BUDDY15. That's code BUDDY15 So Buddy15 at checkout saves you 15% off all Great Lakes Finesse baits. So whether you want to try the Juvie Crawl, which we talk about today, paired with Great Lakes Finesse's specially designed Mini Pro tube head specifically for that Juvie Crawl, or their Snack Crawl, which is another one of my favorites, or some of their great other baits like the Helgramite, the Hover Minnow, the Sneaky Underspin. They've got great drop shot baits. All of those you can get for 15% off just for listening to today's episode over at lurenet.com. And again, hopefully this shows you guys, right? We just want to save you money. This isn't some sponsored thing. We're not making money off this. We just want you to save money no matter where it's at. I don't know anyone at LureNet. I've never worked with any of them. Dan over at Great Lakes Finesse that we talked to today was just kind enough to give us this code that I think is more of like a personal code for him to use over at lurenet.com. Again, it's code BUDDY15, so BUDDY15 for 15% off all Great Lakes Finesse baits over at lurenet.com. That's LURENET.com. So now we are all set. Great deal, great baits, and a great conversation with one of the coolest finesse companies out there, and one that you should be paying close attention to. So let's jump into our conversation here with Dan Miguel of Great Lakes Finesse. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined today by Dan Miguel, founder of Great Lakes Finesse. Dan, I know you're a busy dude. Thanks so much for taking some time to hop on Tackle Talk today.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I'm actually excited to be here. Seeing a bunch of podcasts, I've been on a bunch, but this has always been one on my radar that I want to do. So really happy you reached out. It was a no-brainer.
Hopefully I don't let you down here.
No, it's good. Yeah. No, I've been keeping an eye on you guys. You guys doing some cool stuff. So.
Well, right back at you. Obviously, it's the reason why we wanted to have you on today, is this is breaking the mold. So we kind of talked before we started recording, but really talking to some tackle companies that are doing truly unique things in the tackle market. And it's hard to argue that anybody, especially for us kind of like Midwestern and Northern guys, has done anything cooler in the soft plastic side in the past couple of years than Great Lakes Finesse. So I know here locally around me, I was kind of, I think, early on Great Lakes Finesse, just in terms of throwing it for like my friends and stuff around here. But I know in the grand scheme of things, I was probably pretty late to the party in terms of Great Lakes Finesse as a whole. So even before that, let's go back before the company, just your fishing background. What is your fishing background before Great Lakes Finesse even existed?
Yeah. So thankfully my parents got me into fishing when I was really young. I caught my first bass when I was 2. They were very patient with me and took me out. And then they just took me every time they went, and I just fell in love with fishing. That's all I wanted to do. And ended up getting sponsored by Rapala when I was 16 years old, which is a long time ago now. Like we're talking, more than 20 years ago. And at the time, social media wasn't really a thing and teams were pretty small. So it was kind of a really cool deal being, the youngest person on their pro staff team, and eventually worked for Rapala. And I was also a guide way up in the Northwest Territories, and been on some TV shows and stuff when I was young, and just always been in the industry, worked at tackle shops, just kind of been through the trenches. And then I started my own company called National Pro Staff a long time ago, and that was well over 10 years ago. Some of your audience might know that company. And then, just fishing tournaments just became my number one thing to do. I just loved tournament fishing, and locally up here got, I obviously don't want to like big myself up or anything, but, did really well locally, won several tournaments, made it to several team championships down for the Bassmaster team trail, when they send all the guys down from different trails all over the country. And then, I kind of had ambitions to eventually maybe do the Opens and maybe go for an Elite Series spot locally around here. Within 20 minutes of myself, we got Cooper Gallant, the Johnson brothers, and Evan Kung all compete locally. And that level of competition really breeds good anglers around here. So I felt like, I would have had a chance if I wanted to really go for it. And then I had triplets. So my wife got pregnant, and she had triplet boys in there. And, at the time I was thinking, man, like realistically to pursue that dream would be very challenging and probably unrealistic, really, when you think about it. So my priorities really shifted. And over all those years of, 20 plus years of tournament angling, doing well, I just felt like, okay, what would be the next best thing now that I've kind of made a decision I'm not going to go for it. And that was kind of like, well, I've got all these awesome little tips and secrets and little baits that I had been using for years to do well, and kept those secret for a long time, and figured, maybe this is an opportunity to let people know about those, share those baits, and let people experience that success. And so I started Great Lakes Finesse with a friend of mine that knew about all these little secrets too. And we really didn't think much of it. It was kind of supposed to just be like a little side hustle thing. We just want to make baits for ourselves, really refine them and make them for ourselves. We'd sell a bunch, and if it did well, great. It wasn't really going to be a big deal. And so we ended up releasing them. We started an Instagram page, and before we knew it, we had people reaching out wanting baits. And then we had a couple tackle stores locally that wanted to carry the baits. And my kids are just over 3 years old, so you can imagine the brand is only 3 years old. And within the first spring, we had some of the best dealers carrying our stuff, and we were already to the point where we couldn't even keep up with the demand. It got to the point where we could only produce, we were trying to hire, we were just trying to make the best colors that were the hottest sellers. Half the stuff was always sold out just because we couldn't even make some of the SKUs fast enough. And word of mouth just like absolutely exploded. We won a couple tournaments locally. Guys started winning tournaments locally on the stuff, and the dealers guys were coming in just clearing the shelves. So it got pretty crazy fast.
So before you actually started making your own baits, and you're up there obviously tearing it up on the tournament side of things, what were you using kind of in place of what you've sort of developed now back then? Like, was downsizing the deal? Was that kind of the thing that you guys sort of figured out? That's kind of your bread and butter now.
Yeah,
Great Lakes, we're using like crappie stuff.
Exactly. So, like just like the Johnson brothers, Cooper up here, like the level of competition is fierce up here, and the biggest fish are really pressured. A lot of these guys really know how to catch them, and we kind of got onto this really light line, longer rods, and micro baits program. We just kind of unlocked it. We just started throwing these little micro baits at these fish, and they would just come over and eat them up. And so we just continued to refine this small micro baits technique, how to effectively fish light line. The rods, we started, custom making our own rods to be able to throw these little baits as far as we could. And, so we get away with like 3 to 4 pound test. Sometimes that's what it required. And the stuff on the market just didn't really, like, especially in the bait side, because it was all crappie baits, they just didn't hold up. They would tear really easily. The hooks
are
just
fish and it's
they're
done.
Cheap.
Yeah,
and the hooks for them are really cheap, right? They just bend out. Like, they're not going to handle a 5 to 7 pound smallmouth, and that's generally what wins up here. So, so we just started making our own baits, modifying baits, cutting them right down to almost next to nothing. And the matte finish in our baits, that's from us, our little secret that we used to rub our baits on the carpet of our boat. So we just literally just rub them every night before the tournament, just take the whole bag, whatever amount of bags we're going to use, and just spend an hour just rubbing baits to knock the shine off. Yeah. And we truly felt like it made a big difference for us. Like we'd be fishing around people, and to the point where they're close enough they can see what we're using, but they're not getting bit, and we are. And it was definitely, in my opinion, the knocking off the glare off the bait. So that was kind of all of that really was just built into the design of these baits. Like, we knew if we were going to, start a tackle company and make baits, like, we wanted them to be different. So the matte finish was something that was important to us. Also, here, I'll show you one of our baits. We've got these little grooves in them. So what that emulates is like fish rubbing on the bait, like with their teeth. So we found that as baits were caught more fish and got beat up from their mouths, they just got better. So we incorporated that kind of into the design. And then we also, our years of experience, like between myself and our small group of friends that, do really well in tournaments, like we just find that, I know it's crazy, but like the more realistic the bait was, the less effective it was. So we almost found like there had to be this fine balance between realistic but not. And really all that comes out in the design of these baits. They're kind of like very simplistic, micro, And then they're also durable. So again, like for us, smallmouth they're schooling fish, and generally the window to catch the big ones could be really short, right? And a lot of the best baits out there tear up. So durability was something that we needed to find in the material. And then the last thing was most baits on the market just look terrible in the water. They look great in the package. You see all these beautiful packaged baits. I mean, brands are coming out with this stuff every year, and you're just like, wow, that looks incredible. We put it in the tank or underwater, and it just like, look, it either sinks like a rock or floats really unnaturally. And so we really focused on the details that would help us catch fish. And when we were building the brand, we came up with like some core values, and like one of them was like, we're not going to worry about catching anglers, which is that's something that brands always focus on, is how do we catch anglers in the store. We're like, let's just focus on catching fish. And then the belief there was that if even one person bought a pack of our baits, eventually they would catch so many fish with that pack that they would tell their friends, and then the word of mouth would grow. We didn't anticipate the hyper growth that we got, but that was the theory back then.
It's a good problem to have, yeah.
yeah. So, and we're still true to all of that. Like everything we do, obviously as we grow and scale, it's become more challenging to really, not keep an eye on it, but like really focus on the quality of the baits, just because you're making so many more in a small amount of time. And so that's been one of our toughest challenges, is just keeping the, and I say that in a way that, I mean, we're successful at keeping the quality, but that's always our challenge every day, is making sure that the quality is there.
Well, one of the things, and you kind of got into it there, one of the things I really respect about you all is that you don't try and do too much too fast. You see a lot of companies try and do that. A lot of companies have a little success, and then they try and get too wide too fast, and they lose what made them special in the first place. Where with you guys, I mean, for the first couple of years, probably you had, 3 baits, 4 baits, maybe. Like, you had a pretty small lineup, but you did it right, and you did it so good that obviously, like, the rest of the company just kind of speaks for itself. And then you got to the point where, okay, we've had 2-3 years of success. Let's slowly add 2 more shapes in here, right? 1 more shape. And nothing ever got away from the original mission, which is these downsized, matte, finesse baits. Is there ever like a devil on your shoulder that's like, you know what? We've got customers, we've got a good plastic formula, we got all this stuff. Like, if we made a, like everybody else does, a flap and crawl or a punch and bait or something, like, it would sell. How hard is it to kind of shake that off and be like, no, that's not who we are?
I mean, we're pretty disciplined in that. Like, we know that our expertise lies in these small micro finesse baits. I mean, we get asked every day, whether it's a retailer or a customer, like they want a larger profile of this or that. For us, like we still have a lot to accomplish in this micro space that we don't feel like we really need to get out of it at this point. When you talk about the success and being very slow, that was probably more lucky than anything that we didn't do that. And the reason why we didn't move faster to release more shapes is because we couldn't keep up with the demand on the existing shapes. So we felt like there's no need to release new ones when we can't even figure out how to make these fast enough to fulfill the current demand. So yeah, now we've got, some more capacity and we've scaled the company to be able to, support the growth properly, like not rush it, but do it right. And so now you're starting to see more colors, you're starting to see a few more shapes. And really it's just, it's stuff that we've been using. And, so like you're going to see a couple baits in 2025 that just have been on hold for 2 years. Like the shapes were ready to go. We could have released them. There was some more testing that we wanted to do. And, that's the other thing too, is like, we truly will not release a bait unless we're willing to have it tied on the biggest tournament of our life. So that might seem like, okay, that makes sense. But the ripple effect of that is so much more R&D, so much more perfecting it. Because once you've said, okay, done, this is the shape. I mean, there's so much that goes into, it's just so hard to change it later. So we focus so much on the front end of making sure that it's the best possible version that we could possibly make. And some of our baits have gone through like literally like 10 plus iterations to get to the version we want. I've got a bait coming out in the spring here that, for example, last year could have been released, but we were losing about 50% of the fish on the bait, and we didn't know why. We were really struggling with that. It got more bites than probably any of the baits that we've got. People would have been thrilled. They probably would have figured it out. But for us, we're like, it's not acceptable that we're losing this many fish, so we need to figure this out. And I'm to the point where I was willing to not ever release the bait if it wasn't going to, get the fish in the boat, because that's half the battle, right? Like getting the bite's one thing, but you got to get the fish. So one day I just kind of thought about it, and it came to me, and we made a slight modification. It was genius, and now the bait lands like 95+% of the fish you hook with it, and it's a smash hit, and I'm super excited to release it here in the spring.
Is it hard to turn that off? Like when your brain is wired to just always try and improve something, and you kind of have to have that personality of like, I'm never satisfied, right? Because that's how you get to these just like really killer products. And it's just something that's weird in your brain probably that's like, no, I can push this and I can make it better and I can make it better. This small tweak, this, thing on the CAD drawing, this whatever will make a difference.
Yeah.
Have you ever got to the point where like you put something out and you're like, okay, this is it. It's great. And then that little voice is still like in the back of your head, like, dang it. Why can't we just change this now? I have a feeling that it would be really hard to stop and be like, this is completely done, I'm moving on, versus dwelling on like little things that you just always want to change.
That's a really good question. And I'm going to shoot straight with you. Like, of the baits that we've released, we've over perfected them to the point where I'm so 100% comfortable and feel like, man, we made the best possible bait we could have made there. Just because we analyze baits more than I believe probably anyone in the industry. Like, I believe that our process is probably so much more meticulous. The only people that could rival our focus on perfection would be out of Japan. Some of the brands, like the top brands out of Japan, I think that they're probably as obsessive as we are. But like I said, it comes back to would we have it tied on in the biggest tournament of our lives? Is it the best bait we could possibly make? And 3, if we can add, like the third thing that we always focus on is we will make a change, even if it only means the product or bait is only 1% better. And it doesn't matter what the cost is. If the cost significantly increases the cost to produce the product, we're going to do that. And I think that that's really what separates our baits from others out there, where people they're kind of just putting stuff out there and they're going, this is good enough and this will sell. And I've really eliminated the focus on the dollars and the sales from the product development and even the marketing side. We really focus on the fish catching. Is this going to catch the most amount of fish for people? And our customer is going to be satisfied. And if we accomplish those two things, the sales kind of take care of themselves. So I really don't focus on how, like, I think a lot of brands look at like the pegs or a wall in a retailer and go, okay, like how can our next meeting with this retailer, how can we get more pegs, or how can we get more market share? We don't really focus on that. Like we really focus on the fish catching. And I think that's missed by a lot of brands in the industry. And I hate to say that because I love this industry and there's a lot of really good people, and it doesn't mean that all brands are doing that, but definitely you can tell that there's brands that are focused on the dollars first. And I think that really hurts the product line and the customer and the user experience.
So all of that, like I can 100% see that when you're in control, you own everything, right? And this is like this company that you've built from the ground up. Over the past year or so, you've had a pretty big change, which is you guys came under the Pradco family of brands. Mm-hmm. And so again, I'm not asking you to answer too much here or anything you don't want to talk about, but does that change at all? Like, I mean, again, talking about like, focusing on the fish more than the dollars and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like when it's your company, you can do that. But when bigger money comes into play here, does it change that at all?
I think what's amazing about the Pradco partnership that we formed with Pradco is that they're a private company. They're not an equity company. It's a family-owned company. So that's a lot different than a lot of these other ones that are publicly traded, and there's a lot of pressure from the uppers and board to produce, results for their shareholders. So that was part of the decision. So just to backtrack a little bit, we got to the point where we literally had to cut off at 20 retailers because we couldn't even service them as good as we wanted to, meaning we couldn't produce enough product. Like, we would get an order, like a huge order from a retailer. They would get it in their shop. 2 days later, they've got an order that's twice as big. And they're like, when can we need it now? And we're like, we had just struggled to finish that last giant order. And so it literally was to the point where if we wanted to see this brand get to its full potential, then we would have to, partner with someone that could help us with manufacturing, higher volumes, distribution's a big thing. And so Pradco, I knew I had a relationship with them for years through my NPS days. And honestly, like, of all the brands we worked with at my National Pro Staff days, I was the main guy who talked to most of the brands and the companies. And of all the companies in the industry, I can truly say that Pradco, the people there, and it must be a Southern thing where they're located, Oklahoma, Arkansas, but they're just the most honest, just the most real. I'm trying to find the words, but like, just they're just so good. They're just good people who want to do right by people. They don't want to like do anything that's kind of like offside, or I don't know why I'm struggling to find the words, but you know what I mean? Like, they're just really
genuine. I know what you mean. They're just really genuine, like salt of the earth people.
Yeah. Like, they're not going to play games. They're not going to try to cheap you. They're not going to try to, screw you over or anything like that. And so I knew some of them there. They actually approached me unsolicited. I didn't reach out to them. They reached out to me and they say, hey, like, we're really strong in the South and we'd like to expand into the North. And we noticed you guys are doing really well. How are things? Like, they just reached out. How are things going? And kind of explained our situation. And they said, hey, like, we think we can help you. And so that whole conversation and the whole process took over 9 months. And part of the conversation was, look, we've got this really good brand. We really believe in our model, in our core values. And if we're going to do this, not only is it good for the brand, but it's good for you if we can translate what, like, our homegrown, small company feel to a larger scaled company. And so a lot of the focus was on that. And what I can say is that that's why they brought me in, to make sure. So I have full control over everything, all decisions, whether it's like where the product's sold, the marketing, the product development, approval on stuff. Like, and they're so good at Pradco about letting me do my thing because they see that it's doing well, and they just want me to do my thing. And
it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's to the point where I believe that they're seeing how Great Lakes Finesse operates and the core values, and we're starting to actually translate that into a lot of the other brands that they've got, and try to mold that style of product development, marketing, customer focus, like really being focused on the user experience, but also the customer support, like anything they need. Like, we just need to make sure that we're treating people really well. And so whether it's, timely responses to people, making sure that we treat them fairly. A really good example is, so like our underspin, while we're scaling, like, we make these by the thousands now. Well, our factory got a batch of swivels from our other supplier. And what we found is that we were starting to get a handful of complaints from people saying, hey, the swivel's not turning the blade at slow speeds. And we ended up, I checked inventory and I found one, and I was like, okay, so the decision there was, okay, like, we need to fix this. And so we halted shipments of that product, and we literally one at a time inspected every piece of inventory of the underspins that we have. And that's a huge undertaking for the amount that we produce and sell now. It took us over a week. And the percentage that were faulty was so minimal. I'm talking like a very, very small percentage. And I said, okay, we need to come clean with this. People need to know that, hey, like there could be something wrong with yours. And if there is something wrong with your underspin, we're going to take care of you. And it didn't matter what the cost was. We were going to take care of people. So all they had to do, they didn't have to mail it to us. They just had to say, hey, I've got one. Here's a picture of it. It's faulty. And we emailed everyone a replacement, no questions asked. Didn't even worry about what the cost was. And I think that's the type of thing that people really appreciate from the brand, because we're just so focused on delivering really good value to people. If people are going to, put their faith in us, buy one of our packaged baits and use them, I sleep well at night knowing that that person got really good. They're going to have a really good experience with what they're buying from us. And it just makes me feel good. Our whole team feels good about it. And I think that's why the success is there for the brand.
I mean, like you said, right? Word of mouth is what grew and skyrocketed your business for the first, 1, 2, 3 years. Unfortunately, word of mouth can go the other way too. And all it takes is a handful of people that got a faulty item and one of them posted on the internet. And then all of a sudden you're known as the company that the underspins don't work. So it's like, that's the great thing is like, you do have to have that foresight of going, okay, there is going to be an initial cost to fix this, but in the long run, it will pay 100-fold by making sure that this does not exponentially spread in terms of like the bad PR, I guess, that it gives us out there. So like, that's the kind of stuff that I think people really appreciate with small companies. And it's also the thing that people think that when you join a bigger parent company, right, that kind of stuff goes away. And with some parent companies, it does. And with some parent companies, it doesn't. It seems like with Pradco, you guys have a pretty good setup. I mean, there's some other, maybe like some 2, 3, 4 letter names out there, right, that might be a little bit different if you got acquired by them. And instead of this being a really fun conversation about, hey, they let us keep doing what we do. No, it's hey, we're taking over everything. We're slapping some terrible new logo on your packaging and your quality is going to go downhill from here. So it's like, it sounds like Pradco's done the right thing. And you guys have some great brands under that Pradco umbrella, and you're now under that umbrella too. With Pradco being a southern company and you obviously being more well-known as a northern company, are you starting to see people down south get hip to what we've been doing up here for a long time? Like, fishing is changing. The days of, you probably saw it up there when you were tournament fishing, right? It's like the fish got smarter. It used to be you could catch them, going out and throwing a Rapple floater or something and catching fish. And now it's like, no, I need 4-pound line and these micro baits and, the whole different side of the spectrum. Are you seeing people down south start to get hip to these sort of smaller, downsized baits and seeing the influence spread down to the southern states?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's better to be lucky than good. And I really believe that GLF, the timing of it was incredible. We couldn't have planned it any better. And it was a culmination of, just the smaller baits, but then also the advancements of forward-facing sonar. And then, even the jig and minnow technique, it just really opened people's eyes to finesse fishing using a spinning rod, light line. And we're really seeing that, being at the forefront of this, smaller bait stuff. The technology is just going to get better, whether you like it or not. And I don't mean it like suck it up, you buy in it. I mean, like, it's just, that's the reality of it. I've got my own opinion of forward facing sonar, and I think there's pros and there's cons to it. But one thing for sure is that with the advances of mapping, side imaging, and that's really what drove the pressure, even more so than forward facing sonar, was, the advances of mapping technology and side imaging. I mean, that just put stuff in, people could just find this stuff so easily. You're floating around the lake. It doesn't take long for someone to side image an area and find your stuff. So the pressure, using these small baits, and then just the general awareness with forward-facing sonar. I mean, I personally believe that small micro baits are very much the future for pretty much every angler as the lakes just continue to get pressured and pressured. We're not easing up on pressure. You know what I mean? It's only going to continue to get crazier. So, I think it down south, I don't care if you're catching, 7-pound smallmouth or, 15-pound largemouth. Spinning rods and spinning reels are going to be part of the game.
These also sometimes get written off as like a clear water bait, right? It's like, oh, for it to not have a bunch of flanges on it and be flapping like crazy, oh, it's got to be in clear water. Take it from a dude that throws it in 6 inches of visibility in super fast, swift moving, trashy rivers around here. Like these type of baits, people are starting to get hip to that too. That, okay, a real life craw or shad or something does not magically turn into this giant fluttering spinner when the water gets dirty, and they still get eaten by bass. Bass still hunt without a crazy alarm on these baits in dirty water and in moving water and all that type of stuff. So yeah, the less movement and the more finesse-y type of applications, I think people are starting to realize are not just, yes, they might be very visually appealing, but they can be found in 2 inches of visibility, 20 feet of visibility. It doesn't matter. And we've seen that around here, and people are starting to get hip to that a little bit more too. It used to be, oh, it's water's muddy and it's up. You got to throw something with a lot of water displacement and black and blue. It's like, no, dude, green pumpkin, with no movement gets eaten in dirty water too.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, everybody, we'll get back to the episode here in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by Dakota Lithium Batteries. And you guys know Dakota Lithium Batteries are the batteries that I've been running on my kayak for the past 2 years or so, whether it's my motor, whether it's my electronics, my ice fishing equipment, all of it is powered by Dakota Lithium. And whether you're looking for a 12 volt, 24 volt, 36 volt, they've got 48 and even 72 volts now, everything from 10 amp hour to 320 amp hour, Dakota Lithium has you covered. They're lighter, they're smaller, they charge faster, they last longer, and they come with that rock solid 11-year warranty standard. And if you want to try out your own Dakota Lithium batteries, all you got to do, go to www.dakotalithium.com and use code TACKLETALK5. That's going to save you 5% off your entire purchase over at dakotalithium.com. Great batteries, a great price, great customer service. They're there to help out. Again, www.dakotalithium.com and use code TACKLETALK5. So I think the first time that I actually picked up any of the GLF baits, I think this was maybe I don't think it was 3 years ago, probably 2 years ago at the Cincinnati Fishing Expo. There's a local tackle shop here, Hamilton Bait and Tackle, that had some at their booth.
Yeah.
And, they had like the normal stuff, right? They had all the big box stuff. They had everything. And I just remember walking by, I was on my way to go do a seminar, and I look over and they had this tiny little end cap of these tiny baits that had this little black and red package on them. I was like, and it was snack craws is what they were. And I looked at it, I was like, what is that? And I walk up and I look at it. I'm just like, this is, and it's really hard to stick out at any sort of tackle show or anything anymore because everything's the same. And you look at that and you're like, that is the coolest little nubby do nothing crawl that I've ever seen. And here we are 2 years later. But the one that I've been really having a lot of fun with this past year, and the one that I really wanted to talk to you about today, is the Juvie Crawl. So this is one of your newer baits. This came out, I think you unveiled it at the Classic last year.
Yeah.
So this is still relatively new on the market, but this is the bait that won our Swimmy Award this year for Best New Lure, our totally real and not made up award show that we have here. But it is like, this bait has been such a fun little thing to throw around and figure out the nuances of, and where it excels in some places that you might not think it excels, but it does. But this has been kind of a secret little weapon around here, and something that until recently I haven't even really posted pictures with it because I was having too much fun with it myself, and I didn't really want to give too much away. But we're past that at this point. So I want, if it's okay with you, to kind of do a quick deep dive on this Juvie Crawl. And I guess for starters, when and where was the even idea for the Juvie Crawl born?
We've been fishing tubes for years. Really the idea started many, many years ago when we'd modify our tubes. So we would play with the tentacles, to the point where we'd pull half the tentacles off each side, so it looked like there was a couple little strands that were the claws. But really there's been no innovation in the tube side of things. And from as a tube angler, I've won more money in tournaments, fishing a tube than anything else. And, I just thought, once we kind of got the brand rolling a little bit, I always had this thought that, if we could make a tube that kind of actually resembled a little juvenile craw. There's a couple lakes up here where they eat really small craws, and there was nothing on the market that really worked well. So that was kind of the inspiration for the little snack craw, was that really mimics those tiny little juvenile craws really well. Like, they eat them up like crazy. A lot of people can relate to that if they fish tournaments, put the fish in the live well, and then be able to drain their live well, and there's these little tiny claws everywhere in there. So that was really, it's always just been on our radar that we need something like that. And for us, we're always trying to find solutions to problems we have. And having, for us, we felt like if we could make a tube, because we love fishing tubes, in a craw profile, then that would be, the best of both worlds, right? And so it's not just like a Ned style craw, because you can do so much more with a tube. You can, you can drag it, you can stuff it full of scent, you can put a little piece of foam in them. Like we'd take, at times we take our earplugs, stick them in there to make them kind of like hover or fall slower. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with a tube. And so we got to thinking, how could we make the ultimate, craw tube? So, we looked at pictures of little juvenile crawfish that they would spit out, or if they're swimming. And that's really what the profile, that was the start of the profile, was that's what it would look like. It'd be, very minimalistic, very few appendages. Something that we used to do at times is like literally get to the point where there's maybe 1 or 2 strands in our tubes, and that would be like what we use. And like everyone's throwing tubes with tons of tentacles on them. We're ripping all of ours off. So very minimalistic. We knew that very few would be really good. So a couple little whiskers, a couple little claws. So then we came up with the first shape. The first day, with the first prototype, I cast it out and the tube came flying right off the hook like it did. It was so thin. And we're like, okay, well, that doesn't work. So we had to really mess with the internals of it. Also, as you know, the tube, our Mini Pro tube head, which we released much sooner than the Juvie Craw, that became our best-selling terminal piece because no one makes a really good mini tube jig head. We fish a lot of mini tubes, like a 2.2.
They're always too long. Yeah.
They're too long. Like they stick way back, right? So we wanted the perfect one. We wanted something with a bit more stout of a hook. We fish these in dirty water a lot too. So we wanted a hook that wouldn't bend out. There's other hooks on the market that would bend out really easily. But sometimes we want to use like 10 or 12 pound test fluoro with our mini tubes, depending on the situation. Maybe not on Lake Ontario or St. Lawrence where we're from, but some of the inland lakes are dirtier and maybe they're just rockier. So we were able to pull through better. But taking our tube head and then stuffing it in there, what we found with our earlier generations of the prototypes was it was really hard to keep here I'm just rigging one right now. So if people can see that the whiskers kind of go right in between the hook, right? Well, the first generation, there was no little slit in the head in the meat of the tube. So they never stayed in there. There was just a whole bunch of things. So as we continue to create more and more prototypes, we just continue to refine it, make it sit better. Like the first version sat too low, so it just looked really unnatural, the giant hook shank. And then we got to the point where we're like, man, this thing's pretty good. And then we really started thinking, okay, like, let's not just quit while we're ahead here. Let's really make this thing amazing. What else can we do? So we started thinking about the proportions of the material inside the tube and also the bottom. So you'll notice the bottom is flat. So that was a late adjustment to make sure that it always sits upright. And then the other thing that we did that was a very late adjustment was there's more meat right here in the head. And what we did that intentionally so that we could expose the hook if we got into like any kind of like weedier situations. We could kind of just bury that hook in the head a little bit. You got to kind of mess around with it a little bit to make it look perfect. But so there is more meat right there in the head and then also in the back end where the hook pops out. So that, and this is something that's often really missed by brands, and it's so critical. And it's we're talking about millimeters here, but when you push the hook through, if you push it out and the whole eye pops out, that's too much eye. You're going to get too much gunk when you're pulling this through on the bottom and stuff. So we are so, like, even this tube jig head, it looks very simple.
It's almost flush.
It's like, almost flush. You just want it to pop out enough that your line gets through that hole, but it looks like it's kind of in there. And that's just to keep the debris from piling up there at the front. It kind of slides right through. A lot of really small details that most people would miss or not even, they just take for granted, right? They see Juvie Craw, cool, I'll put that on. But even our tube head, I see it all the time. Tube jig heads are built wrong. The lead is way too far away from the. Sorry, let me start again. The lead is too far from the eye, and it just pokes way out of the tube.
Yeah, there'll be like an actual straight piece of the eyelet that you'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. So you really need to be like mindful of the millimeters. And that was a fun story, funny story when Pradco and GLF partnered. We were looking to recreate the molds so they could be higher capacity than what we were pouring on before. And the first version, the lead was too far, and those southern guys down there from Oklahoma and Arkansas, they don't drag tubes or anything. They're like, "Oh, it looks perfect to us," and we're like, "No, you're way off. It needs to be like a millimeter." And they were like, "A millimeter," and they were like, "This was like my first couple months, working with them, and I felt like, oh man, they're going to be so frustrated working with me." But they're used to it now, and now that they've seen the success, they're totally cool with that level of precision. But yeah, it's those little tiny details that most people overlook or take for granted that are really in all these shapes.
Well, and this goes back to you can do this level of obsession and perfection when you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shapes and you make sure that you get them right versus trying to run before you crawl and you want to come out with 25 different shapes and stuff falls through the crack. That's that thing I love. And it's something that you see with a lot of these great companies, right, that are actually doing cool stuff, is that there's like these common themes that you see with people. It's like the leader is always some sort of tinkerer or, has that motor that's always in the back of their brain that wants to make something better. Almost all of these great companies started out organically and not someone saying, "Hey, I want to start a tackle company." It's like, no, we started making them for ourselves. And you hear that story a lot with a lot of these great brands. And then it's like people that really say, no, I want to take my time with these things and I want to obsess over it, even if it means that we don't scale as quickly as in a perfect world you might do. So yeah, and this Juvie Crawl is a perfect example of that. So if you will humor me, I would love to go piece by piece on this Juvie Crawl and ask you some questions about some of the attributes that are packed into this little thing. So first off, the actual plastic itself. So I don't know what you would call it, right? The recipe or whatever to make this plastic. Do you have to make a different type of plastic or a different recipe for plastic for a Juvie Crawl versus some of the other things in your lineup? I'm assuming you do because you have some different tendencies. Like some of your baits are very, neutrally buoyant. Some of them have floating pieces on them. Do you have to start with the engineering of the actual plastic itself?
Yeah. Every bait starts with the underwater analysis. So we put the bait in the water, and before we even create a prototype or anything, we have we create like a 1-pager of what is the problem, what is the solution, what does the bait need to do, and what are the features that are going to solve the problem. And that's before we even really created a shape. It's like, this is the problem we're going to solve. And when we get to the end, we need to go over this and make sure that we've solved all the problems. So for us, we felt like for tubes, for example, the tentacles are salted and they just kind of fall down. We wanted the claws to just lift a little bit, not a lot. We don't want them to stand straight up. We just want them to kind of lift a little bit in a very natural position where, you picture the fish following it, and then the bait just kind of you picture the fish following it, and then the claws are just lifting, facing the fish. So to answer your question, yes, every single bait, whether it's, we've got the drop minnow. This one, we wanted it to sit perfectly level in the water on a drop shot. That was the initial problem we were starting to wanting to solve. So we built a formula so it sits perfectly in the water. So yeah, every single plastic has really its own formula, and we will manipulate that formula a little bit depending on the shape and the action that we're looking for each one. So every single bait we go through that process to make sure it looks right in the water.
So how do you get something like with the Juvie Craw, your appendages, the two claws, they're not sticking straight up. This is not like a Z-Man situation or whatever where, it's hands up, raise the roof. It's more like, no, we're just coming just off the bottom.
Yeah.
Is that a property of the whole plastic in general, or is there something different in the pore in the claws versus the rest of it? Like, is it more just functional design, or is it
functional design? Okay. Yeah. To answer your question, I mean, there's a lot of brands right now that are trying to knock our stuff off, like, call a spade. Like, they want a piece of the action.
Welcome to fishing, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, and I'm seeing it, and there's two things that I noticed that, like, I it doesn't really bother me all that much, because they're missing the underwater action. They've really not dialed that in. And then second, they're missing those micro details that truly matter, like that millimeter, or how that comes out. So, like, at the end of the day, they're copycat, but they're, cheap knockoffs. But one thing for sure is that internally, there's a lot of brands that would love to know what we're doing with the material, because not only does it perform the way it needs to, it's also really durable, and we're able to get away with certain appendages and stuff that other brands can't get away with because of the durability. So internally, we're all sworn by secrecy to keep that. There's only a handful of people internally that know what goes into these, or what makes these materials do what they do.
Yeah, almost any other company, if you're going to tell me you're going to put this small of a connection between your, appendage and your actual body, this thing is going to rip after one fish, two fish. And yeah, it's impressive that you guys can get the attributes you want out of this plastic with still being, and it's not, again, you don't go down like crazy TPE Elastec side of things, but it's like tastefully in the middle, where it does everything that you want it to do without all the negatives of something like an Elastec that plays, not nice with regular hooks and screw locks and things like that. Yes, like that kind of stuff. I don't have to break out a lighter and some voodoo magic or something to to rig this up.
Yeah.
So the next thing is, with that plastic, getting the matte finish that you talked about earlier. So yeah, back in the day, you're rubbing it on the deck of your boat and stuff. Now these things are coming right out of the package. And that was one of the things that when I saw it at that expo 2 years ago that sticks out, is like, there is no shine to this. It's a natural look. I mean, crawfish don't have glitter bomb paint jobs on them, right? Yeah. Crawfish are gross, muddy, just brown, nasty things. That's what natural forage looks like. So with the matte finish, does it add an extra issue trying to make your plastic recipes or whatever it is? Because I have to imagine this is not the easiest thing in the world to do, or else everybody would do it.
Yeah, 100%. That's like probably one of our biggest trade secrets. It was really important to me, just because I felt like, if we're going to, there's literally thousands of bait companies out there. What's going to make us different is going to be like the little things, like the matte finish, the neutral buoyancy, the way the claws will float on some of our. So those are the things that I felt like, hey, if we're going to do this, let's just try to do it right. And so yeah, it was very important. And yes, it's challenging to achieve that matte finish consistently the way we do it. But we're really proud of the innovation there.
I also love that you make all black as a color option. Just selfishly for me, I love all black soft plastics, and it's something that a lot of people sleep on, and I'm sure a lot of companies don't make because it just doesn't sell well. I'm assuming tried and true black and blue that on the shelf, right? Your normal weekend warrior angler is going to pick that up because they've heard that it works, or they have confidence in it or whatever. But why was it important to you to offer an all black option? Is that something you personally like to throw?
Yeah, it's my favorite color. So same. Yeah, that's why it's in the lineup. Again, like the whole company started with, we're making baits for us. We're making baits that are going to help us win tournaments. And we really didn't. I know this sounds crazy, but we weren't all that concerned about selling. We were just like, let's just make baits that we love, and if they sell, great. And that's the result. Like what you're seeing, when you look at the entire GLF lineup, like selfishly, you're looking at what I like my dream lineup of little micro finesse baits that would help me win and go catch as many fish as possible. That's what you're seeing. It's kind of a story of, myself and a couple other guys and what we love.
You touched earlier on the cavities, like the inside of this thing. One of the things that I love about the overall shape is this sort of like bulbous butt section, I guess, of like what would technically be where the jig head is. But because that's something that I think a lot of crawl profiles miss out on. You know, most of the time, if a crawl is moving or it's swimming away or it's doing whatever, that tail is tucked and it's got this just like roly-poly type look to the bottom half of this crawl, and every other company tries to make the profile of a crawl sitting flat where that abdomen side is like extended and it's long and skinny and it goes an extra 2-3 inches or whatever. If you've ever watched a crawl move, this is what a crawl looks like when it's moving. But then you also did it, and maybe it does just lend itself to the actual action of this bait where it does that, I don't know the right word, it's like a donkey kick almost. Like it's the same thing, OSP Beaver or something does. Like when it's got this sort of, I know if you're listening on audio, you're not getting this, but yeah. So what was your actual hope with the action of this bait when you designed it?
I mean, when we started out, we definitely wanted it to be a bait that we could drag on the bottom really slowly and dead stick and look really natural. I mean, a lot of the biggest fish we catch were, oftentimes we're sight fishing up shallow or moving it very slowly. So that was, the primary goal. But then, there are times where they're aggressive, where we're watching them and they're swimming higher in the water column and being able to swim it. Again, that was kind of a lucky break there that it ended up swimming the way it did, because when I first saw that underwater footage, I was like, wow, like, we made a great bait, but man, this is kind of like, this is just kind of like you work hard, you make your own luck. And that is a really cool feature of that it has that kick. So I'd love to say that I was a, genius and created that kick, but that was just really, really lucky. And it is, you can't make it better. Like it looks really, really good. Talking about the appendages and stuff, there's two sides to that. And so being in the industry for so long and having access to this type of information, I talked about my history of, working for Rapala and just being in the industry, researching. So 2 studies have been done that really come to mind. One is Berkeley did a study on baits and appendages and how much fish eat and hold on. So in a nutshell, the less appendages, the more effective the bait became. On the flip side, one of the biggest online retailers did a study, and they have access to data, and their study shows that the more appendages a craw bait has, the better it sells. So this comes back to, what are the intentions of the company? Do you want a bait that's going to, catch more fish, or do you want a bait that's going to sell more on the shelf when people see it? And I think that's why you're seeing all these baits, is because, there's a lot of chasing of dollars that goes on. And we're really hoping that our brand breaks that mold and shows people that we're going to focus on the fish catching. And I think that really does make us different. And in an industry that's so saturated with brands, we do need to find ways to stand out. So that's one of the ways.
What's interesting, I guess, you mentioned Berkeley right there. One of the big things that Berkeley hangs their hat on is something that you very noticeably do not have on any of these baits, at least that I'm aware of, which is scent. Mm-hmm. You seem to be, I could be putting your words in your mouth, and I'm sorry if I am, but you seem to be in the camp that sight is the most important thing, right? That and we know that bass are visual eaters, among other things. Yes, there are other senses that play into that, but I mean, they are visual eaters. So there seems to be these 2 camps in fishing tackle right now, and one of them seems to be getting bigger now. Maybe it's the tackle companies pushing it more, but there's a reason, I guess, why I can no longer buy, pack of craws without nasty bait fuel stuff soaked all over them, or I can't buy pit bosses without power bait in them, or max scent or whatever. It's like everything seems to be going that way of scent, where you very consciously, I think, have made the decision that that's not a part of Great Lakes Finesse. Can you talk to me a little bit about that decision of how you come to either to or not to put scent in these baits?
Yeah, there's 2 parts to that answer. So the first is that these baits were designed for smallmouth. Smallmouth are visual feeders. For the most part, they're making their decision to bite based on what they're seeing. The second part to that is that we all use different scents depending on the situation, the body of water. And as a group, when we were designing these baits, it wasn't just me. there was no way we were ever going to come to an agreement on one scent that would solve all our problems across. Like there's situations where we want to use garlic. Sometimes we want to use goby. Sometimes we want to use craw. So when we were coming up with the baits, 90% of the time we don't fish them with scent. There are times where we feel like scent does make a difference, and it was important that these baits could be marinated in whatever scent we want, and they wouldn't hurt the action or the profile of the bait. Like, it wouldn't get mushy, it wouldn't hurt the properties of it. So all of the bait, I just feel like I'd rather allow people to make the decision on what scent. And you talked about the packet crawl. I mean, that was a number one chunk for me for years, and on a lot of my flipping jigs for largemouth. But maybe I don't want to use bait fuel. Maybe I want to use, a different scent. So it's unfortunate that they've pigeonholed me to buy that product and be forced to have bait fuel. And, I don't know what happens if I mix bait fuel with another scent that I prefer. And bait fuel is a scent that I've used, and, I'm not going to talk to it whether I believe in it or not, because I'm still on the fence about it. But there are scents I do believe in because I've been fishing them for a long, long time. And I just didn't want to pigeonhole us. And the other thing too is I really do believe that to get the material the way we got and these actions, a lot of the time scents will really hurt actions. So like we talk about, like, there's a really big brand out there that really built their brand on scent over the last several years. They've got one of the hottest selling smallmouth baits. They took over the tournament scene in the north with a drop shot
Berkeley
bait.
flatworm. I'll say.
Sure. You put that thing in it, put that thing. I challenge anyone to stick that thing on a drop shot hook in their sink or the bathtub and watch what happens. That thing sinks like a rock and looks completely unnatural. So I've found that, when you're talking about smallmouth who are visual feeders, what would I prefer? A bait that smells and sinks, or do I want one that looks really natural that I can apply scent when I feel like I need to? And that's, again, it just came back to what would I prefer as a tournament angler who, is just very meticulous about what scents. I mean, I've got a big bucket full of scents. Like I got tons of different ones. I have pretty much every one that is made. And there's certain bodies of water that one works and other bodies of water it doesn't work. So I just didn't want to pigeonhole us.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a word right, but modularity or like customizability is such a big part of fishing tackle. And it does. It bugs me as a consumer when I'm forced by the companies to have something included or do something that I don't need to. Like, can't you just give me a world where I can buy a dry pack of crawl and I can buy bait fuel if I want to, and I can marry those two if I'd like or if I don't like? But it's the commerce side of fishing too. I understand that that's a big part of the business side of things. But I think you poll, 100 anglers on the street, we wish that every bait was like this. We wish that every bait allowed us to do what we want with it. That's why, serious tournament anglers, we don't buy pre-rigged baits or anything like that, right? We want the ability to do exactly what we want. I want the exact hook I want in this thing. I want the exact weight I want in this thing. I want everything that I can do to make it exactly how I want to fish it. I want to be able to do it. And hats off to you all. I think that's a smart decision in the long run that most anglers really appreciate. Yeah.
I will say that our stuff is definitely geared towards the more seasoned angler, tournament angler, very serious angler. The data will show that, a lot of consumers, like the mass market that spends the vast majority of the money, are people who don't fish that much, and they would prefer to be told what to buy and have the scent in there and pre-rigged baits. So again, it comes back to, we've just made a decision that we're going to make baits that we truly believe in rather than chase what, that piece of the pie of the market share and where the dollars are. So who knows where that ends up, where we end up in the end. But, those brands will continue to sell lots of baits and do well with, craws with lots of appendages and scent, and they'll make lots of money.
So here's the big question then, and you can kind of put pieces of this together throughout this conversation, but to kind of put a bow on it, if someone has never fished the juvie crawl before, they pick up a pack, how are you, Dan, going to recommend that you fish a juvie crawl? How are some of your favorite ways to fish it, your favorite tackle to throw it on, all that type of stuff?
Yeah, so, it was designed to be dragged along the bottom or hopped. So you need our mini pro tube head. I not only because it's the right head for the bait, but I truly believe it's the best tube hook in the world right now for mini tubes. So grab a pack of those, grab a pack of Juvie Craws, and then rig it up. You just got to line up the hook shank right between. I mean, we have pictures all over our website, and I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. Stick it in there, and then, just cast it out. And just anytime you're fishing a bait, try to visualize what a craw would do. Like if you think about a craw walking around on the bottom of the lake, it's probably moving pretty slowly, gingerly, maybe doing a little hop if he's startled, but they're not moving very quickly, right? So just try to mimic what you think a little craw is going to do. And I mean, every bass eats craws. So if there's bass in your lake or your walleye or whatever, it won't take you long to figure out if this thing's going. I would stick with more natural colors, like, your green pumpkins, your black. I mean, all the colors will work. The white, full disclosure, is like a bed fishing color for me. So I won't use that outside of any bed fishing scenarios. And I just find white's a really good color for bed fishing. So, it's definitely our least popular seller. The green pumpkin orange is a really good color. I mean, that catches them everywhere. We've got lots of we get messages all the time of people saying they caught their PB with that, personal best. So, and then cast it out. I mean, I would recommend like 8-pound test to 10-pound test line, maybe fluorocarbon. And for me personally, I like a longer, stiffer rod. So I actually use a 7/8 medium heavy rod with mine with braid. So I don't really mess around. There's not a whole lot of play there. And I find I just have more control with the fish. It's just something that that's kind of like a little secret. I lose a lot less fish with that. I think the initial hook set, I'm just able to bury the hook a lot better. And with the whippier rods, generally, if you're going to lose a fish on a tube, it's going to be on that first jump. Like you hook them, they jump, and then your tube flies back. So by being able to have more power on that hook set, especially if you've cast it way out from the boat or from shore or whatever, I believe that having more beef like behind your hook set with a tube and having this beefier hook will land more fish.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. This is not a light wire hook. What you probably got a Must-Add Ultra Point, I think, in here. Like 2X. Yeah. So, you can throw this on a medium heavy 7/8, and you can crack them, and it's going to be great.
It's essentially a jig hook. Like if you're fishing a finesse jig or something, like it's the same. So we use spinning rods, bomb them out there. My step is like 8-pound test to 8-pound test. So braid to fluoro. Sometimes I'll do 8-pound to 10-pound if I feel like there's a lot of zebra mussels or whatever. Drag it around, and then you can also swim it around. It's really good. You can fish this around docks, around cover, like laydowns. Anywhere you'd fish a jig, consider the Juvie Craw, because it's essentially the same thing. It just doesn't have a bunch of strands from the jig. So that's what I would do if I was picking this up.
So I'm going to give you two maybe weird off the wall ways that I've thrown this over the past year and maybe you tell me, maybe you're like, yeah, dude, I've heard of people doing this before or not. But around here, we are sort of small, fast river guys, I guess, for the most part, around where I live. So it's, these, 5, 6, 7 foot dirty, fast rivers that we're fishing most of the time in our kayaks. And this is probably late summer. I got on a fun bite where those fish were just stacked in the tail out of the river. So right before the next riffle, they were just kind of packed up in that semi-deep water before that next big shoot. And I would actually go out on my kayak. And this was I'd get off work. I'd have 2 hours before sunset. I'd take my kayak out to the river. I'd go above that tail out, and I would sit with my kayak faced downstream, but my motor on in reverse. So I could kind of hold my spot above the tail out, above stream. And I would cast this little Juvie Craw into the tail out and almost sit there and tight line it. It'd be really close. I would basically be forcing myself backwards and just keeping that tight line right there. And this thing tucks right down in those rocks, but it doesn't get jammed down in there. And that current would go over, and I'm assuming just flutter those claws ever so slightly as it just sat there on the bottom, and I could keep it in one spot, and it would just get absolutely donked down there. So
that's amazing.
That was a fun, weird little bite that I got on toward the end of summer. And then I don't know the right word for this, but this is a really good like tumbling bait around here. So when you want, those fish like park themselves up in that really fast, just like gross current, and they're sitting there and they look like their dorsal fin should be out of the water, but it's not. And they're just sitting up there ready to go. You can throw this bait, and I will do the whole weedless deal, and I'll toss it up there. And this is a great bait to just toss up in fast current and let the current tumble it down.
Yeah.
Like we'll do it with Neds and stuff like that too. But because this thing is just almost like a little bouncy ball that looks like a little crawl-shaped bouncy ball, and it doesn't like really line twist itself too bad. It doesn't really get jammed down in there too bad. It just kind of like hops over and just lets itself tumble down and get smoked in that really fast current. So those were like two kind of fun ways I was throwing that this year around us.
No, that's awesome. I mean, that makes complete sense. I mean, there's nothing off the wall there. I mean, I'd probably approach the situation the same way. I mean, it doesn't shock me that you're dead sticking it. I fished a tournament last year and I got up on a shallow flat and I was seeing these fish cruising around, and the only way I'd get them to bite was with the juvie craw. I'd throw it maybe 20 feet from them, and then they would slowly, I just let it sit there and just do it, like not move it at all. And I could watch them come over like slowly, and then they would stare at the bait for, oh man, it must have been 30 seconds to a minute at times, like where they're like an inch away from it. And then all of a sudden they'll just breathe it in. And so yeah, dead sticking this bait is incredible. It's super effective. And that was probably the day where I was like, man, this bait is like, this is special. Like it's really special. Yeah.
Well, before we let you go here, if anybody's listening to this and they want to try out Great Lakes Finesse for the first time, so I think you're kind of unique where you don't really sell direct on the website too much. It's more through your actual retailers that you work with. So if folks want to check out what you got going on, where would you direct people to look at Great Lakes Finesse baits?
I mean, they can go to our website, greatlakesfinesse.com. We list out, I mean, there's a lot of retailers now that we haven't put up. There's probably hundreds, if not, 1,000 retailers now that sell Great Lakes Finesse. So it's hard for us to keep the retailers page managed. But you could also go to lurenet.com, and that's actually like the Pradco website, so you can buy stuff there. And if anyone, I didn't set up a discount code or anything for the show, but if anyone wants to buy them from lurenet.com, they can use it's a code I give to my friends called Buddy15. So BUDDY 15. They'll save them 15% if they buy from lurenet.com.
Well, there you go. A little bit of a discount too. That's great. And hey, man, we really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on today. And again, just keep doing what you're doing. I really respect what you guys have done the past couple of years and these sort of awesome finesse, matte, neutral sort of downsized baits, and really sticking to that mission of like, let's worry about catching the fish and the fishermen will come later, right? We want to focus on the baits and make the best bait we can. And it's pretty evident just talking to you and fishing these baits over the past couple of years. So keep it up, man. Thank you so much for popping on today.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate being able to come on here and talk to you finally.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Have a good one.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, everybody, that concludes episode 3 of Breaking the Mold Volume 2. Huge thanks to Dan for coming on and spilling the juice about Great Lakes Finesse, and in particular, the Juvie Crawl. And as a reminder, if you want to pick up anything from Great Lakes Finesse and try them out for yourself, I highly recommend the Juvie Crawl paired with their Pro Tube Heads or the Snack Crawl. The Snack Crawl is a great trailer on finesse jigs. Those are two of my favorite, but they also have killer drop shot baits and hover style baits. All of those baits are available over at lurenet.com, and you can use the exclusive code that Dan just gave you all just for listening to this episode of Breaking the Mold, and that code is BUDDY15. So BUDDY15 gets you 15% off all Great Lakes Finesse baits over at lurenet.com. Again, BUDDY15, lurenet.com. That's the deal we were able to get for you. Again, a big thanks to Dan and Great Lakes Finesse for helping us all out with this code to save you guys some money. All right, everybody, that is our show today. Get ready. Our 4th and final episode of Breaking the Mold Volume 2 comes at you next week with a guest that not only has fished and won at the highest level of the sport, but is also one of the most highly regarded bait makers in the country. So there's your teaser for next week. But in the meantime, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Tackle Talk Podcast. Find us on the internet, tackletalkpodcast.com. You can shoot us an email, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2021. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.